Lights. Thank you. I'd like to call to order the Planning and Transportation Commission regular meeting of June 13th, 2018, and would please call the roll.
Commissioner Alczyk. Commissioner Gardias.
Present.
Chair Lowing.
Present.
Vice Chair Monk.
Present.
Commissioner Riggs. Commissioner Suma.
Present.
And Commissioner Walfogel.
Present.
5 present, 2 absent.
Thank you. So the first agenda item is oral communications on any agenda item not on the agenda. I don't have any cards. Were there any things that were not on the agenda that people want to speak to? Okay. Then we go to the Assistant Director's report. Assistant Director Late.
Thank you, Chair Lowing, and good evening, Commissioners. Just a couple of items to report. One is on the dais you have a flyer for a community event that we're going to host over at the downtown public library. This is related to the housing work program that the Commission has been reviewing, and this will start at 6 o'clock. We anticipate sort of a brief little introduction and this open house style or idea station sort of layout where people will get some information about some of the key items that we're discussing and have an opportunity to offer some feedback and engage with staff in a conversation about their thoughts on some of these important issues that we're addressing to increase housing production. So that's going to take place on June 28th at 6 o'clock at the Downtown Library El Camino room. With respect to City Council, on Monday, the City Council supported a PTC recommendation on the PF zoning change that would allow essential service facilities and city parking garages on the PF zone to deviate from development standards. This was something that the Commission had looked at. And then for the upcoming schedule, I think we're good on the upcoming schedule, but I did want to let the Commission know that a recirculated draft environmental impact report, or at least excerpts of the draft environmental impact report for the Stanford University general use permit was released yesterday. I'll send you a link to those documents so that you can take a look at that. Given the Council's upcoming break in July, we're going to quickly review that document and get scheduled for the City Council on June 25th, a draft comment letter for the Council to consider. And so I'll shoot you that link so you can take a look at the documents yourself if you're so interested. And let me just take a look and see if I have any other notes here. The only other thing is to just talk about the, you have an At Places memo with updated tentative schedule. We missed the mark by a wide margin, I think, on this last one. We wanted to clean that up so you had a sense for what's happening in the next couple of months. So that concludes the report.
Okay. The first official business item is a study session on traffic safety operations and system monitoring projects and activities within Palo Alto. So this is a study session. There's no action to be taken, but comments are going to be welcome from the Commission. Commissioner Gardias, did you have a question?
Yes, I have a question, and sorry, I just realized I should have asked that the possible agenda changes and revisions. When I see the audience, I believe that the majority of the audience came to discuss the second, the item 3 on the agenda, and I was wondering if that is true. Would it be possible to, with the whole respect, and I know that I am late, just to flip this so we could just go through the item that we already reviewed at one point of time and pretty much let them go home?
I only have 2 speaker cards, and both of them were for the item that is next up. So I'm not sure that that's the case. Are there a lot of people that want to speak to the second item, which is the map? That doesn't look like it. Commissioner
Can we
Gardias?
poll the audience and understand? Okay, if they are, then maybe I'm wrong. So in this case, let's continue.
Yeah. So it's for the second item. Okay, so before we take the speaker cards, there's a staff presentation on this, so we'll hand that over to staff.
Thank you, Chair. We're going to have our traffic engineering lead, Rafael, lead you in a presentation about the first part of this traffic study, safety and operations report, and Ruchika is going to follow in with another portion of that report, and we're happy to answer any questions at the conclusion.
Thank you, Chair Lowing and Commissioners. My name is Rafael Rios. I'm the traffic engineering lead for the city. And as Jonathan mentioned, we're here to give a brief summary of the first traffic safety and operations report that we plan on making an annual report. First, a little bit of an introduction to our team. This is a somewhat recent picture of our team. There's currently 9 of us staffed with 3 vacancies, so we have a kind of a high vacancy, a high rate of vacant positions right now. But as a team, we cover a wide range from transportation planning, safe routes to school, CIP projects, and really Ruchika to my right and I are here to discuss really the traffic operations and safety program that we're currently in. Really the goals of our work are to provide an efficient multimodal roadway network, and in doing so to minimize the impacts to the local residents and the local residential streets, and at the same time to provide safety improvements for pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorists also. Quick overview of the report. It's really broken up into 4 sections. Those 4 sections that I'll be covering, the first 2 tonight, include our traffic operations projects and some of the current and technologies that we use and future ones that we look forward to using in the coming years. We also want to cover this traffic safety program where we improve various roadways throughout the city and how we monitor data. So a brief overview of our traffic operations projects generally covers the ongoing maintenance and just upkeep of the traffic signal system around the city. We do signal coordination on arterials, and we do have a few corridors with adaptive signal timing where we're actually measuring the actual number of cars and adjusting the timing on the fly automatically. And then we have just traffic signal projects where we're upgrading projects, installing new projects, or doing pretty significant changes. So for our general signal coordination project, we try to update signal timing at every intersection. We have 100, soon to be 101 traffic signals in the city, and we update the timing on a biannual basis, including the coordinated corridors. All of our arterials, except for Charleston and Arastradero, run some form of coordination, and then 2 of the corridors, San Antonio Road and Sand Hill Road, use the adaptive signal timing program that I was referring to, and Charleston and Arastradero will have adaptive timing coming this September. So at that point, all of our arterials, both major and residential arterials, will have some form of coordination. Traffic signal upgrades, we typically do 1 to 2 major signal upgrades. Most recently is the Middlefield and Barcadero intersection, and we do a lot of small upgrades, just either upgrading countdown heads, audible pedestrian signals, or just doing small safety improvements. Some of the big projects have it as upcoming, but Upgrade Downtown is going to modify about 9, it's really update 9 traffic signals. Park Page Mill is the next signalized intersection, it's about to come online. San Antonio, Charleston, we're right in the middle of the community outreach portion. And then a few other intersections. Page Mill in Hanover is going to be a big collaboration with the adjacent developer and as well as the County Roads and Airports Department. Some of the technologies we use to either collect data or to monitor our traffic system, we are about to roll out a Bluetooth data collection system that will help us collect travel time data as well as some origin destination. We're partnering with the county and some adjacent cities to get even more robust data. We haven't implemented yet, but there's a new method of collecting high-density data at traffic signals where we can measure signal performance measures more than just a typical level of service, but actually how efficient is the signal operating, and it gives us recommendations on where and how to make improvements. And then one thing we were considering, it's not yet decided on, is the use of cellular data. It would be something we would purchase, something we would collect ourselves. Another exciting technology is changing our emergency vehicle routing and integrating it into the traffic signal system. So instead of a fire truck calling a green light at the signal ahead, the green light will already know where the truck is going and give it green lights along its entire route, like even around turns and such. And then we also have, we're one of the very few cities in the country that are really progressive with connected and automated vehicles. We do offer our signal data through an internet broadcast, so automobile manufacturers can collect our signal data and share it with their cars if they have their certain programs going on. With that, I'm going to hand over this presentation to Ruchika, who's going to talk about a couple of the next chapters of the report.
Thanks, Raphael, and good evening, Chair Lawing and Commissioners. My name is Ruchika Agarwal. I'm an associate engineer with the Transportation Group. I'm going to talk about some of the active and the past traffic safety projects that the division initiated in 2017. The first one up is Middlefield Road North. The project limits for this, the limits for this project is from Menlo Park city limits until Forest Avenue. Council approved a concept plan last year, and the plan is currently in the trial state along this corridor of Middlefield Road North. We are collecting data, and right after the summer, we would bring up to the council to make future recommendations for this project. Copper Street, Coleridge Avenue intersection came up as a part of Safe Routes to School program. It was identified as an intersection where improvements were required for safety of pedestrians and kids walking and biking to Walter Hayes School. And the staff implemented a few pilot in that intersections with the traffic circle and collected resident feedback. The active project is the San Antonio Road, East Charleston Road, as Raphael mentioned a little while ago. The main goal of the project is to improve the pedestrian safety and also improve the traffic operations through this intersection. Here are some pictures of the projects that I just described. The upper right one is the one Coleridge Avenue and Copper Street, the temporary traffic circle that was implemented for a trial period. The other two pictures are from Middlefield Road North, where the contractors are installing the barricades and the striping as a part of this project. Some of the other elements that we worked for traffic safety is electronic speed feedback signs. Now we have a total of 17 speed feedback signs that are installed throughout the city along collector and major arterial roads. They have all been for the ease of maintenance, we've been updating them and maintaining the same equipment, so we have a consistent equipment throughout the city for those. The enhanced crosswalk treatments, the rectangular rapid flashing beacons, that's a standard for the city for any mid-block or an uncontrolled crosswalk to improve pedestrian safety at an area or at a neighborhood where there is high pedestrian activity. We have two locations that we are working on right now for 2018, and based on need basis, we look into those treatments. Complete Streets project, As a part of the paving project, transportation staff collaborated with Public Works Department and implemented some traffic calming measures along Middlefield Road. For example, new traffic signal equipment at Embarcadero and Middlefield Road, a fourth crossing leg at Middlefield and Addison, and a two-way cycle track to connect the two offset legs of North California Avenue, again off of Middlefield Road. Systems monitoring, the data collection program, this really is the first year. 2017 was the really first year where the city is planning to collect turning movement counts and data for 21 intersections throughout the city to help us understand the level of service and the delay for this during the AM and the PM peak hours. And we plan to do this on an annual basis moving forward. The travel time studies are typically done for case-by-case for each individual projects as and when needed to evaluate and understand what the impacts were of the improvements that were done for any particular project. Engineering and speed surveys are typically required every 5 to 7 years for a city, for police department to be eligible to enforce the posted speed limit by the use of radar. In 2017, we collected data completed the survey for 70 70 collector and arterial streets, and 58 of those were certified. And there were some others that were certified in an earlier survey in 2014. In November 2017, Council adopted a resolution to adopt target speeds for segments of streets that were not justified for use of radar during the survey. And staff is hoping to make geometric and roadway design changes along those streets to reduce the operational speed, and in the hoping to have the use of radar for the future. The traffic collision evaluation, the city depends or relies on the Crossroads database. This is a web-based portal. It's a traffic collision database that is maintained by the Santa Clara County. It is a county-wide database, and that's where we rely upon high incidence locations and other traffic collisions informations, in addition to the PD's source, where we have to do for a project-by-project basis. And I understand there are some concerns and discrepancies around this database, and we'll be happy to respond to those and answer during our question and answers time. And this concludes our presentation, and we'll be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, before we do commission comments, I'd like to take public comment. The first speaker is Mark Crady. 5 minutes. 5 minutes.
I speak here, I assume? This is the right spot?
Yeah.
Great. So I'm here to talk about the report. A little background, I live half a block away from the intersection of Lincoln and Middlefield Road. Craig, who's here, has kind of started, well, first of all, I mean, the intersection is quite dangerous. It's we hear collisions there all the time. Even today, there was a T-bone. In the last 2 weeks, we've had 3 accidents. It seems to be, for some reason, increased a lot this year. Craig's actually been collecting data for the last few years, and for some reason, this year in particular, it seems to be quite bad. Anyway, so in the course of doing this, I wanted to understand how bad is this relative to other intersections. I mean, is this just how it is in Palo Alto, or is there something unique about this intersection? And so I contacted Josh on the Traffic Commission, Transportation Commission, and he said he referred me to this report, which is a great report. I'm really happy you guys are putting this together. I was surprised to see, our intersection, the intersection I'm concerned about, was not listed on the list of most dangerous intersections on page 50-something, 59 maybe. And so that led me to dive into the data itself. I guess the way this works is that when the police come out to an accident, police occasionally they don't always create a police report for that accident. When they do create a police report, I guess that gets filed, and then at some point these police reports, I guess, are supposed to go into, somehow get into this CHP database. I'm not sure, Ruchira, you were talking about this county database. Is that the same thing as the CHP database, or is that different?
The source of this database is Switter's database, yes.
Okay. You said something about Santa Clara County. Is that the same? You were talking about the same?
The database is maintained by the Santa Clara County.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, so I downloaded the data for the years that this table is based on, and I did, just wrote some simple software. I've got a background in software. I worked at Google for a while, and my results were quite different than what the table indicates. And so I guess one question is, why is there this inconsistency? I mean, it's possible I did something wrong. I think I did an accurate analysis. But anyway, there's a question of why these two are inconsistent. There's also a deeper question of, is this data even that useful in the first place? Again, you go from an accident happening on the street. Maybe it's bad enough that the police are called. Maybe the police will actually create a report out of it. If they do, hopefully that data somehow gets into this database. It doesn't seem to be, because I mean, just from a personal standpoint, the intersection, we get at least 8 accidents a year at the intersection that I'm concerned about, and over the course of 5 years, I think there's maybe 6 reports in this database, I guess. 8 accidents I see where the police are called, and there's it's a significant accident, at least. Anyway, and so there is that question. I guess I would be happy to help out if I can help in any way. I mean, whether it's, doing analysis on software. It sounds like there's some interesting things here that you guys are working on with new technologies. I mean, maybe you could somehow use this I don't know, automated the systems monitoring stuff to actually, get better data on accidents. I wonder if there's even sources for insurance information. Do insurance companies provide accident information? Anyway, I guess I'd like to get a better sense of, in particular, I'd like to get a better sense of my intersection. How bad is it relative to other intersections? And again, I'd be happy to help, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Did you guys want to respond, or did you want to just have them write to Josh, or what?
I can provide a little bit of clarification.
I think we'll hear the public comment first, and then we'll go.
Okay. Should we wait till after public
Respond to any
comment?
questions.
Sorry?
If the commission should have any questions after the public, we're happy to respond to those questions.
Okay.
I guess maybe, I did email Josh, and I had a couple of exchanges, but then it kind of died out, and I didn't push it too hard. I guess I do have a question of just in particular this table. I mean, is there somebody I can talk to who created the table, and can I work with them to figure out whether I'm wrong or they're wrong, or what's going on?
Yeah, so our staff is happy to chat afterwards and get him connected with somebody.
Okay, great. The next speaker is John, can't quite read it, Gislin?
Exactly right.
Okay, great, thank you.
Hi, I'm John Gislin, and I live on Middlefield Road at the section where they've had this Middlefield North traffic report. In fact, I'm one of the residents who cajoled the city for years to get that project going. And I'll say we're very pleased with the results we've seen so far, and I've enjoyed working with these talented engineers in the traffic department. That being said, this traffic safety report is full of very bad data. On page 51, it lists the top 10 intersections where there are accidents in Palo Alto, and it lists the number of accidents as 5 over a period of 5 years. That is just so far from accurate that it's embarrassing. Now, I had a brief conversation with Raphael before the meeting started, and part of the problem is probably accessing the Switter's database. But when we put our report together defining the characteristics of Middlefield North and why we needed reform, we went to CHP and got their data and collected all of their PDF reports and analyzed the data and shared it with the city to show that the intersection of Everett and Middlefield has more than 5 accidents accidents itself every year, not 5 over 5 years. So traffic data is challenging to collect and analyze, no doubt about that. But the data that's being given to you is not sufficient for you to make informed decisions about what to do. We had a similar situation with an interim report on Middlefield. It was done in December of 2017 by a consultant, and the consultant couldn't add up the numbers correctly, had misinformation about speed and direction. And we met with the city, with Josh and his team, and they agreed that they would look at it and correct it, and they did. But we shouldn't be paying consultants when they give us bad information. It turns out that citizens are probably one of the most reliable sources of data on traffic accidents available, because when we foresee a problem, we then band together and we monitor the intersection where the accidents are. During 2015, the residents on Middlefield North tried to determine how many accidents were really taking place compared to what's reported to the police. We estimate that less than half of accidents actually get reported. And we know this because we took pictures of the accidents as they happened and then compared the data, time and date, to the CHP database. In fact, even when the police show up at an accident, it's no guarantee it gets reported. And I have confirmation from former Chief Burns that that's the case. An officer might come to an accident, and if nobody is injured and there's no complication and the drivers are exchanging information, no report may be filed. So with the decline or the elimination of our enforcement division, that problem has likely gotten worse over the past years because there are fewer officers available to do that type of work. There's another report from the Office of Transportation Safety that compares cities of similar size, and Palo Alto is in the group of C, which is with 50,000 to 105,000 residents. If you look at that report for our city, we rank number 1 in the number of accidents with bicyclists under 15. And we rank in the top 10, by the way, number 1 is bad, that's the worst, right? Okay, we rank in the top 10 in other categories of pedestrians over 65, bicyclists, and speed-related accidents. That's the type of macro data I hope that this commission would look at and try to understand what we need to do to take action to correct it. And finally, I think that the accident rate in Palo Alto, the accident rate on Middlefield has dropped because of the reconfiguration. So solutions can work. That's the good news. The bad news is there are more and more groups popping up like this group from Lincoln and Middlefield and like the Crescent Drive and University Avenue that have traffic problems, and we're all coming to solve our local problem. And that's one approach, but that's sort of not a very organized, systematic approach. I hope that you, as the commission, can look at the bigger picture and figure out where the most severe problems in Palo Alto exist today. Thank you.
Great, thank you. The next speaker is Nielsen Buchanan.
Thank you for giving me a little bit of time. I would like to speak a bit more globally about what you're looking at tonight. Let me give you a brief history of how I got civically involved. 6, 7, 8 years ago, a permit parking program for Professorville exploded on the launch pad. And I read in the newspaper and said, gosh almighty, there's Ken Alsman was a proponent for the neighborhood, and Ken had been my nemesis when he was planning director at the city of Mountain View, and I was CEO of El Camino Hospital. Everything we couldn't get done was in direct opposition with Ken. So I thought that was a bit ironic. And at the same time, I said, what's this mess in my front yard every day with cars piling up, trash, slamming of doors and all that, as a wave of parking had come all the way down to the 100 block of Bryant. And that's how I got involved with permit parking and secondarily with traffic. I think there's a generic problem. And I remember Jim Keene's response to the council when we finally shoved this issue up to the council and they were about to enact the permit parking program. And I could read Jim's body language and his direct statement that if we start this, it's going to create a lot of others. And I could feel the burden that he felt. Here comes a lot more work for staff. If one neighborhood gets it, other neighborhoods are going to want it. And of course, he was 100% right. It's that resistance to change that I want to talk about. And I think it's rational. I think it's rational on Jim's part because the council is really in charge of a small city, small town pretending to be a city. And the entire structure for running the city is a false premise. And I think in a way you're seeing one tip of the iceberg here where the staff is not able to produce all the data. It's not the staff's fault. In fact, I've been openly throughout my endeavor with the city council, I've tried never to fault staff. I've tried never to fault Jim Keene. I will fault the council for piling on more work than can be done. And as a result of that, a lot of things get done in mediocre fashion. In less than 5 days, this council is going to be considering a budget. And in that budget are a number of new resources that I think are going to be vital to try to circumvent the growth of this city, traffic, parking, and whatnot. There are resources for people and technology, and we wouldn't have to be going through sort of these retrospective views of problems. It's kind of ironic when citizens see something clearly enough on their front door, we dig in and create stuff. I mean, I dare to say if a handful of us haven't quantified a whole lot of parking data, we would never seen permit parking. It was driven by residents, just as John and the other residents are saying that they know a little bit about the data. And you are the adjunct to the council. So I implore you to take a look at the staff reports that are coming to you. And I like looking at them because I would never understand the scope of what the Transportation Division does without this annual report. It's staggering to me to think they can do all that stuff. But at the same time, there's a fundamental inability to do quality work some of the time. And that becomes the nub of the problem because the issues are not executed well. We're still struggling with the kind of reforms to make permit parking work. And this is not the night to go into that. But what we're talking about on the traffic and safety issues is the tip of the iceberg. I hope that's not too confusing. The optimistic part of it is that the next budget is a ray of sunshine, namely staff resources, technology, and the like to manage these issues a whole lot better. And that is something you should have been paying attention to because we're in a constant negative loop if we don't change this. Thank you.
Thanks very much. That concludes the public speakers on this topic. So I'd like to now move it to the commission for any questions or comments. I think we could just couple those together and just put on your light if you'd like to address your comments or questions. Commissioner Gardias.
Thank you. Very briefly, can we get a copy or reference of the report that gentleman in the green shirt was referring to, please? Yes. Thank you.
Any other comments on the document that we have or questions to staff?
Yes,
Sorry?
I have a number of questions, but I have a question to you. How would you like me to organize the questions? Because I have them scattered across the entire report. So,
yeah, I was going to suggest that we just jump in because it is a long report. I don't think we can just kind of focus it on each individual item. And I was also going to suggest that atypically we should probably just go with questions and comments unless we have a few top-line questions. We can take a look at that and see if there are to just clarify it for everybody. Did you have any other ones of those?
sure. Yes. No. So I will pretty much introduce my questions, but they will be very scattered, right? I didn't categorize them to along any particular sequence or anything like this. I mean, I probably would like to start with this, right? I was just getting to the city hall, and this was the last newspaper from today. So you're familiar with Ross, and that's another article. So I would appreciate some update on Ross Street, and specifically that commission was involved in this, and we approved the plan for Ross biking boulevard and all the improvements that are happening right now. So there are two angles. One is that I'd like to understand what's going on, so that's number one. But also, I think that if there is a continuing interest and from the neighborhood along Ross Road. Commission should take a look at this from our perspective again, because we reviewed it, but apparently there is lots of neighbors are not happy with the solution. So we should just take a retrospection and analyze if there is something that we could have done better. It's just a lesson for us to learn, because maybe in retrospection, maybe we could have done it differently, because it's been going on for a year now, maybe. Right. So my first question is about this, if you can later on respond. Then the second question is about on page 18, you're talking about traffic signal timing. My question is like this: is there a coordination of the green light along Middlefield when it's getting to Menlo Park? Because the cars are stuck in there, right? So we have improvement on our side, as you show on this page, but later on maybe you can tell us, is there a coordination between the cars, between the green light wave of Palo Alto and Mountain View? Next question is about collection of this packet, page 20, is about real-time collection of traffic data, and then you tell us that this is based on the cell phones that are turned on, and then based on this you collect this data from the car. So if you could just pretty much tell us how accurate it is, I'd be wondering how reliable this data is. On page 22, you pretty much tell us how this collection, the Bluetooth technology collection, when you connect your phone to car Bluetooth, right? How it is being collected. I was wondering, and then you cite that there are unique MAC identifiers, which is the network, unique network device that's unique device identifier that's connected to the network. I was wondering if there is some GDPR that just went live on May 25, if there is some relationship to some data privacy, because you collect lots of data. I just heard you making a comment that you were about to acquire some data. So I was wondering, where is our privacy in all this data collection? So other question would be, if somebody gets this data, can they identify my personal movement throughout the city and then understand my personal behavior, for example? Another scattered question would be about Cooper and Coleridge Avenue. That is, we had a discussion about the roundabouts, and then, if you remember, it was probably a year ago, and then Commission took 4-3 stand and decided to pretty much to nix this roundabout in preference to the 4 stop signs that were installed as an interim solution. The comment that I have here is related to doesn't await response, but I just want to make this comment because those are faces I see first time here. That we discussed this roundabouts, and this is part of our policies. It's in the comprehensive plan. If you can find the reference, we remember specifically it is. It is one of the policies that is written in the comprehensive plan, and because of this, lots of solutions are by default resolved by this roundabout. What is happening that when we had a discussion a year and a half ago about those roundabouts, there was no specific scientific evidence presented whatsoever about pros and cons of those roundabouts. there was evidence presented about roundabouts, but this was evidence that's related to the large ones in the large cities. And but then I have never seen a document that would pretty much talk about the physical attributes and the safety pros and cons of those smaller roundabouts that are being installed of the intersection of just two streets. And I would like to see one. And the reason is that pretty much I was thinking for the last few months, I think about some other things as well, so don't take me wrong, about if there is a hole in this thinking. And then I found it recently. And I was riding a bike, and then I was coming to one of our roundabouts, and I naturally took a left turn without going around. And I understood that from the bikers, this was the first time when I was biking that route, and I understood that from a biker's perspective, when biker approaches roundabout of a smaller size, he's not going to go around. The car will, but the biker will not. And I think this is a gap in the safety of those roundabouts. I'm just making the comment for the record. Hopefully somebody's gonna look into this. Next question is about packet page 32. This is about the traffic study on Middlefield Road. And I remember Commissioner Waldvogel, when we had a discussion about this, was specifically asking the question about that daily traffic that was compared between 2016 and 2019. And he made the case, you can go back to those meeting minutes, that those data was not comparable because this was vacation period. If I remember, you can correct me. So. Yeah, so for this reason, right, if you present this in the report that there is a average traffic, daily traffic, ADT, again, this is page 32, pretty much you see decrease. This is not truly what's happening because the observation was done in a different season than the original reading. The next question, shall I continue, or maybe I can take a break? I have a few more, so I can go through the rest, but I can relieve the floor to the colleagues if they have some questions.
It's getting a little bit long, and I would like to ask staff, are you going to want to answer these after we all chat, or do you want to answer them in a group?
Well, no, I think I'd like to sort of take them from commissioner to commissioner and answer them. I do think some of the questions that we're hearing here go beyond what we're actually presenting. Right. And so I don't know that we're prepared to answer some of these more detailed questions, but we're making notes, and the ones that we're able to answer, we'll answer. Okay, so we'll just... it's up to you on timing, of course.
We'll just have you continue, Commissioner.
Very good. Yes, that's a correct observation. Some go beyond, but they are related to traffic. So there is we also, when we were approving a Ross Boulevard, around the same time, we were discussing Charleston improvements. And then because there are some changes, I presume, because of the pushback of the residents along the Ross Boulevard, which you can tell me later on what's the update is. I was hoping that maybe we can revisit improvement at the intersection of Lewis and Charleston. There is, when you get from Lewis to Charleston, there is a refuge island in the middle of the street. And then I remember the plans that you showed us were pretty much redesigning this refuge island and also allowing the traffic from the other side of Lewis to start flowing back to Charleston, which is not the case today. So I'm asking you just pretty much take a note of this, and I was hoping that maybe because of this changes on Ross, maybe there's an opening to revise those plans. The reason that I'm saying this, because if this worked for many years, there was no flow from the other side of Lewis to Charleston, maybe we don't really need to change it. Next question I have was pretty much about the packet page 34, where you showed the improvement at the intersection of East Charleston and San Antonio, and then pretty much you showed the raised curb extension. That is, my question is, there is number of the parking stalls along that frontage road that goes along San Antonio. I was wondering, maybe by sheer accident, you can tell me whose cars are those that park along this parking strip. I'd be just very interested in that because there's an office building, there's a church, there's a gas station. I know this was not the topic of your work, but maybe you can tell us. Maybe you know. A question about the electronic speed feedback signs. Is there I understand that pretty much that we don't have any feedback signs that would be flashing when there is when the car is below the speed limit. When I read this, I understand that this is the case, but I'm looking for confirmation that truly we don't have the flashing lights when the driver rides with the speed of 34 miles an hour or on 35 speed limits road. Because personally, I don't dislike this sort of warning that I'm riding perfectly well within the speed limit. It's just distracting. And then I think that this would be the last question. Just a moment. I'd like to understand what would be your conclusion of the changes of that you have in the intersection of morning and evening intersection counts. Pretty much you're showing, when I look at those different bars, that there is that in the peak hours in 2017 we have lesser traffic than we had 3 years ago. So I'd like to really understand if this is truly the case. When I look at those bars at the first sight, it looks like this. But logically, something doesn't work here. So must have, where did the cars go? So I'd like to understand the executive summary on this topic. And the last item, I don't remember the page, but I remember that somewhere in your report, and you can tell me that somewhere in your report there is a note that that while the traffic density along Middlefield went down, there is an increase on the parallel roads. I cannot locate this within the report. Maybe I can find it later, but I remember specifically that in one occasion, it looks that drivers took pretty much to avoid taking Middlefield, they took some other roads parallel to it. And I will try to locate it to you in the report. Thank you very much. Sorry for the long time.
I think he's going to address his questions.
Okay, so thank you, Commissioner Gardias. You clearly read the report and appreciate the time that you've put into it. There's a few items here that fall into the sort of ongoing, a bucket of ongoing infrastructure projects. Ross Road, you mentioned, Charleston, Coolidge, and Cowper. And, you know, it occurs to me that I did not send an email to the commission, but I'm wondering if the commission was aware of the city council meeting last night. It was a special meeting where the commission or the council spent 4 hours talking about hearing public comments for, I think, about nearly 3 hours about these types of issues on Ross Road and elsewhere. And so the council, the full council was present, I believe, had an opportunity to hear from the community. I think about 50 people came to speak about these issues, and then they had their own sort of perspective and guidance to the city manager on the sort of the status of our ongoing and planned transportation work underway. And so some of the immediate outfall from that is that our staff is, we heard those comments, we're huddling together and we're trying to, put together a web page that would respond to the comments that we heard last night. And over this council break, we'll be thinking a little bit more about the program that we have. And if there's some adjustments that we need to make, we'll have that conversation with the city council, and we'll certainly give the commission an update when we have a little more clarity on that. You had a couple of other items about the data collection. We actually have a future discussion planned. It was supposed to be part of this item, but we weren't quite ready for that discussion. So I think in the fall, you were talking about this Bluetooth data collection, and you had some comments about how it was, you wanted to know a little bit more about how it was collecting the information to sort of peer behind that. And we have those same interests as well. And so we're still looking into that a little bit more and can provide you some more detail on that probably in the fall when we return to the commission. You had a comment about privacy and data collection, and we have ongoing requirements with the city in terms of how we collect data, and that's something that is of paramount concern. This is something that's come up many times before when we've put in cameras and we're trying to count pedestrians or bicyclists. And so we have a pretty, I believe we have an established privacy policy that the council's endorsed when we take into consideration when we're doing these types of things. And so anything that we would do would be consistent with that policy. You asked about a frontage road on Charleston and who's parking there. We could probably spend some time doing that. It's not something that we're prepared to answer today, but we've made a note of that, and we can come back and respond to that. And we heard your comment about the flashing lights when you're meeting the speed limit, not to be distracted by that. I have a personal appreciation for that as well. I feel like I'm doing something wrong when it's flashing at me, so maybe we can have that not flash. Well, it goes when you're, yes, I guess I should be slowing down before it starts flashing. All right, so then there's, I think Raphael has a couple of responses to some of the other things that you had mentioned about some of the data counts, traffic counts going down, or difference over years. So on that last point that you mentioned, Raphael will respond to that.
Okay. Regarding the annual data collection and accounts and you've seen decreases throughout the years, we're not entirely sure, but I have a pretty good idea of what's happening. A lot of these are for signalized intersections and intersections during a peak hour or the highest peak hour of a day. And as what we've noticed over the years is that the peak period is stretching out. So during the most congested times, let's just take University and Woodland, for example. If there's congestion downstream in East Palo Alto or on 101, the sheer number of cars going through the intersection would be reduced due to congestion downstream. And what we're presenting here are actual counts, and it's not necessarily the demand that wants to go through the intersection, but how many cars actually got through during that peak hour. And as we know, we've seen University back up and sometimes take 30 minutes to get to the freeway. And that's why I suspect a lot of our intersections are pretty close to the capacity. So if there's a spike in traffic from one year to the next, there might be a decrease in counts of actual cars that go through the intersection.
Yeah, so thank you. If I can interject a comment, right? So if your observation is true, right, it would be nice to start looking into this data differently, because if you say that the spread of a peak hour is gross, right? So pretty much the population it's within the time, right? It's as opposed to from 4 to, say, 5 to 6, it's going to be from 4:30 through 7:30 because of different reasons, right? Maybe thriving economy. For this reason, truly, you should count the cars within that larger spread, right? That would give you the comparison of the population, right? And then, although you may just see the decrease within the certain portion of that peak, right? But then the impact on the entire population would be different, because in reality you would see the decrease in the throughput of the cars passing through this intersection, because they would just go all slower during the longer period of time. Correct?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Also in the report, we do represent roadway segments that have a 24-hour count, like a whole day. That's also a good measure to look at how many an increase or decrease on a specific roadway. I think where you're seeing the really big jumps are at the signalized intersections for a 1-hour window. Intersections are usually counted and analyzed based on the worst hour. So.
Did you have any other answers, or you? Okay, great. So let's move on then. Commissioner Monk?
First of all, I'd like to acknowledge and welcome our mayor to our meeting tonight. Thank you for attending, and also a lot of members of the public. I guess I have a preliminary question for staff, and also to maybe clarify possible questions that the community might have. It's clearly marked on here, this is a traffic safety report, and that you're implementing processes so that you can come back to us in the future. And I think a lot of those processes are going to be measuring traffic and congestion apart from the safety concerns. So I just want to make sure we're talking about two different types of information and study that I think the community is interested in, because clearly safety is important and we're concerned about it. But I think what people have expressed in the community is the increase in just volume of cars and traffic backups, things like that, and trying to understand what the technology might be doing for us in the future. So can we expect to hear more on that piece of it down the road as you implement some of these newer technology? Or I think that's what you're implementing it for, not just safety. I thought it was also for congestion purposes, correct? I just think that a lot of folks would be interested in knowing what our plans are for that and rough turnaround timeframe.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I do believe part of that information we will be presenting to the Planning Commission in the fall. We do have some interest in wanting to share with you some technology that's available that will just give us some information about how people are moving through the community, sort of origin and destination type of movements. And that could inform public policy about what sort of decisions we make about street signal timing, or how people are routed around through the city, or where we put some of our energies for capital improvements and things like that. So I think we can begin to start having that conversation when we come back in the fall, and I think when we hear from the council after the break, and when we return with this transportation sort of reboot, I'll say, that's my term, then I think we'll be able to plot some of that stuff out too.
Thank you for that. And so just a few questions in the report itself, and a lot of what I observed in the report, Commissioner Gardias alluded to, so I'm glad he brought them up. So in regards to the adaptive traffic signal control system, I think you first talked about it on page 20, and is Cinco Green the company that you're using for that? And can you just explain to me what that is, how that works, and then distinguish that between, or is that related in any way to the Bluetooth and/or the carrier data that you're going to be using? Are those completely separate functions?
It's completely separate.
Okay, so if you can just explain the first one when you have an opportunity.
Sure.
How
Cinco
that works.
Green is the.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I can go through my questions.
You want to do that way? Okay,
Yeah,
great.
however you want to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, and actually, I'm glad that you are getting carrier data, because that's who has the data. anything other than the carrier really doesn't make sense. And I know that they anonymize the data before it comes to you, so I'm not that worried about it, but if you find that that process isn't being followed, then myself and I'm sure our entire community is concerned about those privacy concerns. But if you're just getting the anonymized cell signal data to measure movement, I think that's really critical and probably the best measure versus Bluetooth in any event. So I'm glad that that was not in the report. You talked about the Bluetooth company, but not the carrier data. And as a side note, I was at Mobile World Congress in Barcelona just as a guest with my husband, and I see that Nokia has done a whole pilot study on not only car movement, but also bicycle and pedestrian movement, so they know how many and how fast everyone is moving on all the different modalities. Happy to share what I learned at Mobile World Congress with you later on. In regards to the concerns about accidents not being reported, clearly we know that police are called out to respond to an incident. They may or may not issue a report, and/or people might not want it disclosed. So we have all those factors. Maybe you can talk about whatever standard deviations you have in your reporting that, if it's crossed the line, how do we know if the studies are accurate or not? And I think that we had some speakers tonight who are interested in hearing that, and/or if you have suggestions on how we could capture these in maybe an anonymous way or an informal way or in some other way so that we can get a better sense of the true number of incidents. I saw something just the other day on, I think it was that intersection on Middlefield where these folks are talking about, and yeah, a lot of it's just careless driving, which I think your cameras are catching. So it's just something to think about. There was one reference to a study on page, forgive me for a moment. Page 30 with the was it Middlefield? Yeah, I guess it was on a packet, page 30 and 31, we were talking about Middlefield North. It's not really clear to me what your information is telling us here in the summaries. I don't know what it means about this, the way it's written. To me, it looks like more studies needed. And I also had a question about the pilot period, as Commissioner Gardias alluded to. It looked like a lot of that was collected during the summer months. So maybe you can just kind of look at the report out on those 2 pages and let us know if it is really telling us anything. I'm not really sure what to take away from the way it was presented. Thank you for now.
Okay, thank you for those questions. Just to clarify, Synchro Green is the name of the software. Trafficware is the developer or the manufacturer, sales. And it's an adaptive control. Traditional coordination, you do counts and you set up your timing and you have a preset cycle length and green times. What the adaptive timing does, it takes advantage of more advanced and newer technology of detection, and it can measure like how close the cars are coming together, if there's a lot more than usual, and it could dynamically like increase the green time or cycle length beyond the preset maximum. So when it's supposed to handle spikes in traffic and dips in traffic demand a little bit easier than having a fixed coordinated plan.
Manufacturers that you were,
no,
or is that's separate?
That's completely separate.
Okay.
It's the same Trafficware company also develops our connected vehicle module that broadcasts, all right, this signal's green for 30 seconds, and like developers or car manufacturers can subscribe and get that data, like how long the green times are, and it's up to them to develop their user interface.
So it's in the pole or the signal, and it's seeing how far cars are apart?
No, we have a central management system that sends it to a cloud, and manufacturers can subscribe to the cloud. That's completely independent from the adaptive control, which is measuring and detecting cars. It's really smart detectors, if you will, on the road, counting cars like half a block away, and saying there's more traffic than usual coming. Let's give them, instead of the maximum 20 seconds of green, let's give them 25 seconds or 30 seconds, and it'll adjust on the fly, which is a relatively new technology.
So both those technologies that you mentioned are both related to signal timing and how much green you have.
Yes.
And are they also going to be related to the railroad crossings? Because a lot of the times you'll see a green light, but you can't go because the guard's down, or you can't make a left turn because traffic stopped, again, because the train is there. So some integration, I guess, with the rail crossings, is that occurring?
Our system operates independent of the rail system, of Caltrain system. What it does is when a train's coming, it sends a signal, and we have to cut off whatever we're doing, give the track, or just in case a car's on the track, we have to give them a little bit of green time to clear, and then let the train pass. And while that's happening, we usually try to let all the traffic go at the same time to be more efficient. And then once the train's gone, we pick up where we left off.
I guess what I'm referring to is if you're on a parallel road like Alma, cars should be able to turn down into the neighborhoods on the other side of the tracks. That's not interfering with it, but the lighting doesn't allow for that in some instances.
What happens is we don't control the trains, and it's really hard to judge because a train in any given day will fluctuate within like a 3 to 5 minute window, and that's considered acceptable by Caltrain. And so what we do is when the actual train triggers, crosses a certain point, it sends us a trigger says a train's coming. Our first priority is to clear the track. And then after that, we'll give Alma, say at Charleston, we'll give the southbound left and through a green light, and then the northbound through and southbound through movements. That's pretty
Right, you might be giving a light to turn into the train, but they can't,
No,
or whatever.
not while not while the gates are down.
Or they should be still being able to go north-south.
Yep.
Because that's not crossing over the track.
Exactly,
So
yeah.
they do have that ability.
Yeah, that's historically what's been operating, and we're not changing that. The adaptive timing that would take precedent over the adaptive timing if we add it across the tracks. At this time, we're not anticipating doing that. Just to move on, the collision data, what we did point out from the public, the speakers, we did notice some discrepancy in our data. Ruchika mentioned we use the Crossroads database, which is maintained by the county. The Crossroads database is primarily the same Switters data. It also has the capability of incorporating data points from the independent police departments from the city. Palo Alto's are not yet in there. They're upgrading this. Our police department's upgrading our system, hopefully by the end of the year, where it'll have an easier integration. We did notice some discrepancies in the counts, and the way to pull the data from Crossroads is not. There's multiple ways to do it, and they don't always produce the same results. So we are going to look into this further and likely issue an updated table for the report. I should say, though, when we do specific safety projects at an intersection, we'll look at data directly from our police department, all the collision reports that they collect, and we'll analyze what exactly happened. Was it, like a kid versus, turning left and broadsided a car, or what? Our police data, as I mentioned, they're updating their database. Their previous and current to now database is not really easy to compare intersection to intersection. That's why we use Crossroads to come up with, say, like a top 10 list, because we really can't, unless we go to each intersection independently, and there's thousands throughout the city, find out the total, then rank them. Crossroads is supposed to do that to us, but we noticed the discrepancy and the variations when querying data differently. And so we're going to look into that and likely issue an updated table for the report. You mentioned the Middlefield North study. What's in this report is really just a snip summary of it. That study is actually still in progress. The data collection window is, it's actually going until June 30th, so it's still in progress. And then we're going to issue an updated, a more complete report. We did do an interim report a few months back, but we're going to bring a final report and recommendation. It'll be developed this summer. So actually, this report was done well before that. I mean, the Middlefield North study's not even complete yet, so.
Thank you.
Commissioner Suma?
Thank you, and thank you to staff for the report and the presentation, and thank you for the public. So at a high level, it sounds like it would be really great if the city could utilize some of the residents that are collecting so much data. I think they make a good point about, especially the accident data, which is really important to a lot of people, as some of the other commissioners have pointed out, of course. And because they're there all the time, and of course the staff can't be there, especially when you're stretched so thin with so many vacancies in your department. So I think if you could find a way to work with them and use them, and I'm still confused, does the Crossroads data come from the CHP database? Or was that the fact that they were using the CHP database and you use Crossroads, was that where some of the discrepancy came from?
The Crossroads, it's within Palo Alto, the Crossroads database is essentially Switter's data. We tried to, it's relatively new to it, we tried to use the tool that kind of gives you top 10 locations, which resulted in mixed results that we're going to look into. But for Palo Alto purposes, until our police department upgrades their system, it is essentially Switter's data. So.
Okay. And then, so a couple of things. I mean, I looked at the data on the parallel streets to Middlefield going up and Middlefield going down, and it's on packet page 31 that Commissioner Gardias recommended. And I was wondering if that's because the traffic is so bad, people are using cut-through routes. Because to someone else's point, maybe Commissioner Gardias, it's kind of, we don't experience traffic going down. I mean, we just don't. So, and I live on a cut-through route, so I wonder if that's partly what's going on sometimes when you see traffic going down. Do you have any?
I apologize. We're trying to find where in this report. I know we mentioned some of that in the interim or the midpoint update for that specific project report, but not, I don't believe it, or we're trying to find it in this citywide safety and operations report.
Mm. Well, it's just kind of a general impression.
Yeah, in general, we haven't seen too much of the case where traffic decreases because traffic's shifting to another street. It's possible that if traffic is really increasing on the main street, there is some overflow, but usually both streets are increasing in traffic.
Okay.
I believe for Middlefield North, without looking at the numbers, I believe what we saw is that there was some increase on the side streets, but it wasn't like too large of a number, but I don't recall that. Actually, I'd prefer to hold off on that until we can look at the numbers more closely.
Well, it's packet page 31. It says there's a 30.6% increase in overall motor vehicle along the 5 parallel routes to Middlefield Road. That was a specific reference, but
Can you give us the, not the packet page number, but the other page number?
it's packet page 31.
I think, I do want to state in the final report for the Middlefield Road North, we're going to include percentages and total volumes. I know like in the interim report, we reported percentages which looked pretty high, but when you looked at the gross number, like a street might have a baseline, a low number, and when when you say like a 15% increase, but then was it 2 cars an hour or not? We don't know. So I think that's one thing I'd like to look into more as part of the Middlefield North project when that comes up.
It sounds like the Middlefield North project is going pretty well, though. I mean, so that's a good thing. And it also sounds like we're going to get a lot of new information in the fall. And I had a question about the OTS rankings of the city that we got. We scored very high, or in some of the, compared to other cities of our sizes. And if the staff looks at that, and what, can you comment on that?
I think us personally, Ruchika and I, we haven't looked into the OTS data. I'm not sure if that's something other staff members or Josh wants to, or does or wants to include in future evaluations. To this date, though, we haven't used OTS. OTS does involve a lot of collision rates, where you compare the number of collisions to the traffic volumes. We just don't have that much data for a lot of our local streets. Everett we do because of the Middlefield North project, but like Lincoln and other streets, we don't collect traffic data to create a rate on a regular basis.
Yeah. Okay, and once again, I think it's an opportunity to get that data from people that live really close by, especially when they have the ability through, to create software and take a look at that. So parking and traffic are really difficult, I think, both of them, because, you fix it here and it just goes someplace else. So I appreciate that, how hard it is, but I think at a high level, we need to look at getting I think the data should match up. It's kind of a problem for me that our data doesn't match some of the CHP data, and I of course don't know why, but I think that that's an important thing to look into. And I'm glad that you had the opportunity, that the city residents had the opportunity last night with Ross Road and other parts of that bike ped plan, and that you'll be looking into that. And then, I did want to, just anecdotally about traffic circles, because I live right on one on Yale Street in College Terrace, and people go around them the wrong way a lot, and sometimes it's because that's the only way they can go with big trucks, and a lot of times it's just randomness, but bikes go around them the wrong way, especially children, all the time. And I think just anecdotally, another comment I would like to make is that all those kinds of devices, the more you can plant them, the safer they get. I had constant accidents on mine before it was landscaped, and it's just much more visible. So I know you do that now as standard with bulb outs and those kinds of things. So yeah, for me, at a high level, and I think there's a problem with a workload in your department, but I keep hearing that, so you might not be able to fix some of these problems until that structural problem is fixed. And for me to take away also is, and that's not your fault, and to work with the neighbors. Thank you.
Commissioner Walfogel?
Thank you. First of all, I really appreciate the idea of generating an annual transportation report. I think this is a great thing, and over the course of the next couple of years, we'll see some interesting results. But one thing I'd like to suggest, I'm going to stick to some very high-level comments. If you go back to presentation page 3 that outlines the goals for the team, I'd like to suggest adding some high-level metrics to those goals on presentation page 3. So I think that from the discussion, the third goal, improve safety, it's pretty easy to track metrics against improving safety. I think collision data is probably a good proxy for safety data. I mean, there may be something better in the transportation literature, but I'm sure you can find something that's meaningful. And, we have had some good discussions about data biases and whether we're tracking magnitudes versus trends with the data sets we have. To be honest, I think we're seeing the limits of our data science, that, we may need some higher pay grades to settle some of those questions. For the second goal, minimal impacts, are you familiar with the citizen survey data, the National Citizen Survey?
Yeah, certainly, yes.
Yeah, broadly, I would assume you've seen it. One of the questions in the citizen survey is, let me make sure that I get the question right. It's question 5A, traffic flow on major streets, and this is on a scale of 0 to 100. And over the last 9 years, this is tracked from 43.1, which I guess was the satisfaction level or whatever this measures in 2008, down to 35.4 in 2017. It's tracked from 37.3 to 35.4 over the last 5 years, 2013 to 17. So that's within the margin of error. So I guess the good news is that the level of badness is not increasing very fast. But for this goal 2, I would suggest finding some measure of how citizens perceive traffic flow as a metric on impacts. You could use citizen survey data or you could use some other data, but I'd like some kind of qualitative perception that we've measured, because I think that if we were looking at that, that would be a way to see things like the busy hour, is now the busy 2 hours or the busy 3 hours, that basically circulation through the city may have gotten worse. Does that make any sense to find some proxy or some way to measure that?
Yeah, so I guess, I see Raphael making some notes, and we'll continue that conversation. I think that we probably, I don't know that Ruchika or Raphael can, respond to those sort of directional questions, but we can certainly pass that on to Josh in the city manager's office to understand.
Yeah, and the same thing with efficiency. I'm sure that there's some professional definition of efficiency. I don't know if that's the perfect, if efficiency, measured as aggregate throughput of the network would be the right measure. My guess is that's probably not the right measure, but I think you have to lean on your professional expertise to find some way to track that, because otherwise we're looking at things like upgrade projects, not really understanding, are these the right ones? Are these really the ones that are optimizing efficiency or minimizing impacts or improving safety? It's hard for me to tell from the study whether we're doing the right things or not. So those are kind of high-level comments. Just to jump down into the weeds for a second, I've looked at a lot of the cellular and Bluetooth data from multiple sources, and I can tell you, and we can discuss this offline if you want, or you can bring this into a later meeting. I can tell you that some of it that I've seen is really good, some of it is not very good. It really depends on the purposes that we have for the data. Some of it is, 100-meter resolution, some of it is 1-meter resolution, some of it is, 5-second resolution, some of it is 15 or 30-second resolution. And just depending on what we're doing, we really have to be very careful looking at the sources and also looking at the analytics that wrap around it. After it's anonymized, I've seen some quality degradations. I've had long discussions with vendors about how they calibrate the data. And all I can say is this is complicated and hard, and the more help you get, the better. And then if I'm going to go all tech weenie on you for a second, are we doing any V2X trials? Are we doing any V2X?
We don't have anything in the works right now. Yeah, I'm trying to make everything compatible, but nothing in the works.
Okay, I'm going to make a few comments. First of all, I really want to thank the public for coming in and calling attention to these, the perception and the data. It may be, for example, that police can and only should cover and report on half the accidents. We can't opine on that. But that should at least be disclosed in the data that is being put out to the public so that elected officials like council members, appointed officials like ourselves, and the public, most importantly, understands what's being reported out. It could even still be statistically significant with 50% of the data reporting. That could be fine. I just think we should really err on the side of disclosing everything that we know about the data. And if only half of the accidents are being reported and that's not reported, it can just kind of nullify the whole effectiveness of the study. So I'd really like to underscore that in future data collection and reporting out. The second thing is, and this is a little bit repetitive, but I'm kind of asking a question about your answer. I'm not quite comfortable with what you're saying about, if cars go somewhere else, is that a good thing or a bad thing? If there's at one point 38% decrease, they went somewhere. And I would think that that's just as important to understand where they went. Secondarily, if that's only 3 cars, I understand that, but then is it worthwhile reporting the percentages at all if it's only a few cars? So it seems like it was very positive when you're getting North Middlefield, much more under control, because that was a really big problem. But if they're doing cut-throughs, that could be okay too, but let's just find out where they go so you can evaluate that, would be my suggestion there. A third suggestion is that, yes, the PTC on June 28th, 17, rejected the recommendation that the pilot be made permanent. And I thank the transportation staff for listening to that and doing what we think was the right thing. Just would add as a footnote that, getting involvement from people up here, either collectively or, some liaison on some of these projects earlier, would head off a lot of consternation and make things more efficient for you in your very heavy workload. Not repeating other folks, because some folks have covered what I had said, but there's only 1 or 2 more. No, I won't ask that one. It was referenced, some of the data is just reporting and what is the conclusion. So I think we always like to say, great, you got the data, so now what do we do with that? Some of that is on the 3.2 on page, packet page 30. That one might still be in process, so it's not ready to go. But to the extent that you can report out more than just, the speed went up or down, tell us why that's meaningful and tell us what we think we're going to do with that. So I think I'll leave it there. I don't know if you have any responses to that. You don't need to. Just please take notes and pass it along. Any other comments from the dais? Commissioner Gardias?
Thank you. So in reference to those items that we spoke and cutting through the neighborhoods, I think that this report is missing one chapter that would put some spotlight on the traffic that cuts through the neighborhoods. Let's just call it the chapter outside traffic in the neighborhoods. And so if you could just maybe add it to your report when it's going to go to the council and or the next revision, and as much as you can provide in it. I understand that you may not have the data, but knowing the story that it was like half a year ago, if you remember, couple of the council members were involved into discussions with the neighborhoods about the traffic that cuts through Crescent Park and pretty much gets to University Avenue, taking Center Drive and Crescent Drive. And actually, I can tell you the story because I was actually coming from the other direction, and I noticed that traffic, because at one point of time, I was working in the East Bay, and I was coming from the other side of the bridge, and then pretty much getting to my neighborhood exactly through Crescent Drive and Center Drive. And then at one point, I met this wave of the cars that has never been there. So something happened, and then, of course, then later on, there was a rumor, and the neighbors raised red flags, and as you remember, a couple of the council members were involved in the discussion about the calming of the traffic that has never been there. So was it a Waze or some other applications that caused those drivers to start cutting through those neighborhoods? I will not pretend that I know all the cars, but I know those cars are not from my neighborhood, right? I live in that vicinity. Those people were not from those neighborhoods. They must have been coming either from, they maybe work in Palo Alto, and maybe they were cutting through this neighborhood or somewhere else, but they should not be there. Because there is just going back to the suggestion, so there should be a chapter that would somehow summarize observations around the increase of the traffic or the traffic that because of different measures may be pushed to the neighborhoods. We would like to understand this. If you can quantify it somehow, that would be great. There is an impact on the neighborhoods because of course we think about the streets as the transportation platform, but on those streets, kids may play soccer or they may play basketball. In some neighborhoods still do, and but because there are cars from the outside that may be pass through those neighborhoods in a different, more aggressive way, those kids may not be socializing on the street because of this reason. If I am a local driver, if this is my neighborhood, I know everybody, they know me, I drive more safely, more carefully, but if there's somebody from outside, they will not stop, they will not care, I suspect. So my suggestion is please add a chapter that will somehow quantify and address this problem. And then just going back very quickly to the discussion on the Ross Boulevard direct and late. I hope that once you're going to provide the feedback to the Commission, I hope that you can just be frank and just tell us what really we did wrong when we looked into this Ross Boulevard improvement. I'd like to understand what went wrong. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to just conclude this item by saying that this is very high value. So what I'm about to say, don't forget what I've just said. Please bring more. To my mind, this is kind of, talk about car light in this city. This is sort of transportation light. You've got some other huge issues that you're working on. And we like to be informed and help you with them. The downtown parking study with, I think, 7 recommendations came to us over a year ago, and we haven't seen anything since then. So please bring us more so that we can help. And thanks for the presentation. Okay, thanks. So the next item on the agenda is quasi-judicial public hearing on mapping for 2515 and 2585 El Camino Real, which is the old restaurant, Olive Garden restaurant. Commissioner Suma has chosen to recuse, right? So she'll be leaving for this portion and then returning. Just for the record, we still do have a quorum present with 4 commission members.
Yeah, in 2016, before I was on this commission, I participated in public hearings about this project and also submitted a letter. So I felt it would be better for me, even though this is not the project itself, but a map issue, I thought I would just recuse myself. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, any other disclosures? No? Commissioner Wolfo, no? No? No. No further disclosures?
Great. Well, thank you, Chair. Margaret Netto is just going to do a brief overview. You have a PowerPoint in front of you, but I think we're just going to do this verbally.
Good evening, Chair and Planning Commissioners. My name is Margaret Netto, the project planner. The item before you tonight is a vesting tentative map to combine 2 lots into one 39,000 square foot lot. This lot will create 13 residential units and up to 13 commercial lots. The resulting lot, this subdivision would facilitate the construction of a 39,000 square foot mixed-use project that was previously approved. The project would replace the recently demolished Olive Garden restaurant, which is about 9,000 square feet. Staff recommends that the Planning and Transportation Commission take the following actions and recommend approval of the vesting tentative map to the City Council based on the findings and conditions. That concludes my staff report. I'm here to answer any questions, and the applicant is here as well. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to Commissioner questions. Commissioner Monk?
I was going to propose making a motion and then through that process.
That's fine.
Have a dialogue. So I'd like to move to adopt staff's recommendation to approve the vesting tentative map to City Council based on the findings and conditions presented in the staff report.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
Moved by Vice Chair Monk and seconded by Commissioner Gardias. Open discussion. Did you want to speak first, Commissioner Monk?
If there's anything you want to relay to us on the parking and BMR units, we could speak to that. But other than that, I don't really have any problem with the project. I just have some general questions. So I don't have anything to say. I support the project. I think it's great that we're trying to make the best use of this land designation and create additional housing.
Okay.
Yeah, if there was a question there, I don't know that we have any more to add. That's in the report. As Margaret noted, this is a project that was previously approved. It was understood and anticipated that there was going to be this ownership map, condominium map coming forward, and we're just processing that map now.
Commissioner Waldvogel?
Thanks. So I'll vote in favor of this, but I do have a couple of questions. One is that I don't think we've seen this combined residential and commercial condominium format before, or at least I haven't seen it in the last couple of years. And could you just explain how this association works? Is this a single association that represents both categories?
Yeah, that's correct. And you're right, we don't see a lot of it here. And it's a little, in my experience, it was a little bit more common in Southern California, where you would have mixed-use developments and an interest in wanting to separate the ownership of different components of a development between the residential and the commercial, so that those different sections can be sold off to different entities. But yes, it's one association, and the areas where there's overlap or interest is in the common ground space, or where there's access requirements, such as the access to the driveways or some other common area space. And it just sort of sets forth the parameters for how that area is dealt with or regulated.
So just so I understand, so if the roof on the commercial side needed to be replaced, then the assessment would be on everyone, the residential as well as the commercial? I'm just trying to understand how this works.
Yeah, and I think for that level of detail, we look to the CC&Rs, which is required for all condominium projects. Of course, the city does look at the CC&Rs, but we're looking at it for a very discrete set of requirements that are set forth in the municipal code.
I mean, that's a normal structure of an association.
Yeah. And
I read the CCNRs, and I believe that, roofs are counted as common areas under these CCNRs.
Yeah, do you have any further, I mean, we do have the applicant here too, who might be able to respond specifically to the question. And Albert, do you have any more to add on that?
No, I think the applicant would be best able to answer those sorts of questions.
Yeah, well, I guess what I'm asking from staff is this a normal sort of a structure for mixed use condominium?
I think it's not uncommon. A couple of weeks ago, or maybe a month ago, the commission also saw an alternative structure, which was to actually create separate parcels, and then rather than having a condominium structure. Within the condominium structure, you could also have kind of like subcommittees within the HOA that deal with the different parts. But this idea of having a condominium structure to deal with, both residential and commercial condominiums is not uncommon.
If there are no other questions, we can put this to a vote. All in favor of the staff recommendation and the motion on the table, please signify by raising your hand. And that's 4, and no one opposed. So that passes 4-0. Thank you.
Congratulations. Good luck on the project. Thank you.
Shortest staff report of the year, and see what kind of results you get. Okay, so I think now we're going to go to committee questions, comments, announcements. We'll bring back in Commissioner Suma. Okay, so we're over on Commissioner questions, comments, and announcements. Let's take those first and then look at future agenda items. Are there any questions or comments or announcements? Jonathan, I had a question about if you've gotten any feedback from the consultant that we heard from our last meeting about follow-up items on the parking study.
Yes, I did. And so based on that, I'm just trying to remember, the consultant did find that there was some additional data that could be collected, and has prepared a sort of revised scope to conduct some additional work that includes addressing some of the comments that were raised here at the commission, I guess last time we met. And there was some question about the distance of some of the housing projects to Caltrain, and so there'll be clarification on that. There'll be more descriptions added to the survey sites, including some of the surrounding land areas, land uses, and whether or not it's located in an RPP. We're going to attempt surveys of, we're going to resurvey, I should say, the sites on the weekday late night periods, which was the time that had the greatest parking occupancy, and also include on-site vehicles in the demand calcs and recalculate those rates based on information received from that. We'll conduct informal interviews of some of the tenants there at each of the sites as we're able to do that, and ask some questions that relate to their experience in trying to find parking when arriving home. Let's see. So, yeah, I mean, and then there's a little bit more analysis that will go into the report, and we heard some other comments about just how it was presented overall, and make sure that we're maintaining an objective sort of narrative throughout the document. So that's something that we'll be looking at adjusting, and we'll return to the commission probably when we come back in August to continue the conversation about the housing work plan framework.
So when they're talking to people who live there, are they going to actually be doing the interviews themselves? The parking, the staff of the parking, I can't remember the name of the consultant.
Yeah, it was
Sorry.
Fair and Piers was
Yeah.
the.
Is it going to be their personnel that is doing the sort of intercept interviews of folks?
Yeah, but we're going to look at the survey questions and understand what those are before they commence.
Right, but they're the one, I just was wondering if they were going to farm that out, or if staff was going to have to do it, or needed us to do some of that for you to help things along, or what?
No, the consultant's going to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And what about talking to the development, the apartment managers there?
I'm sorry?
Talking to the apartment managers to ask about, what their perceptions are about, enough parking, or
Sure.
when it's overparked,
Yeah.
What's their theory on that?
Yeah, we can engage the apartment managers as well.
Yeah, that'd be good. I mean, like our transportation presentation tonight, I mean, when the cars don't show up, they must have gone somewhere. So it's always good to find out what the impacts are, like this transportation study tonight, as well as parking. Yeah, go ahead.
To add to that, maybe even talking to some of the neighbors to find out about spillover parking is going to be useful. And because we don't want to have, it doesn't feel good to have a really negative response up here to a report like that, but we sure don't want to do it again. We want to make sure we're getting the kind of data. So maybe even once you set up the methodology or the questions, maybe even run it past us, because we just wouldn't want to repeat that, I was thinking.
Yeah, I think that this is not the kind of report that's going to generate universal support for it, because I just think there's different perspectives on parking, but we want to do the best we can to produce a document that's credible, and so we've heard the questions that were raised, and we have a path on how to address that. Our next meeting with the commission isn't for till the end of July. I think we'll probably be doing those surveys before then. So.
Yeah, and just speaking for myself, I'm extremely open to a report that really convinces, me with good data and a good methodology that we're overparking buildings, particularly affordable housing. But it's just, parking and traffic are such a insurmountable, difficult problem in this city, and that, it would be, it's not going to get better unless the city stops growing, or and Stamford stops growing, or people's habits really, truly do change. So, yeah, so I'm very open. I don't think that there's any particular perspective that keeps me from not being open to that.
Commissioner Milk, you had questions, or?
Jonathan, I'm just reviewing the report that was prepared by the consultant at our May 30th meeting when they first came in, and it had the timeline of our process to get to ordinance. And so I'm just observing here, and you might have just addressed it. It looked like what was supposed to happen by the end of June was to get feedback on an ordinance framework So my question is what does that mean, and have already done that? And then you're giving us July to do more framework for an ordinance, and we're going to do a draft ordinance review August 8th, but yet the same deadline for a draft ordinance is August 29th, and that's what's written in front of us and what's written in that prior thing. So I guess my question is what's changed? Are we still going through that process? And what does framework mean versus, to me, framework means discussion versus having a draft in front of us.
That's correct.
So are we behind on the proposal that was laid out on May 30th? The proposed timeline?
Our timeline has to adjust.
We are adjusting our timeline.
That's right. And
Okay.
so I think we were going to come back, we're going to have our community meeting at the end of this, at the end of June.
Right.
And then we were going to come back, I think it was either at that time or the next meeting to have a discussion. But our consultant, unfortunately, is not available for that next meeting, and I'm not available for the meeting after that, actually for the next 2 meetings after that. So we're going to, we've got some work to do after the community meeting and with the comments that we've heard from the commission, and we're going to return on August 29th for a discussion of sort of the beginning of what we think might form an ordinance, and then receive commission feedback. At a subsequent meeting in September, we would have a draft ordinance for the commission to have a public hearing and discuss that.
Just so I'm understanding, the community meeting is not happening because...
No, the community meeting is happening at the end of June.
That is happening at the end of June.
That's what this flyer is that you should have at the...
Okay, but you're saying that...
That's what that's about.
Right, okay. Right, and that's what... So, but you're saying that the consultants...
Let me just make it even clearer. So, community meeting June 28th. The next time we're going to talk about the housing work program is going to be August 29th.
Okay, just looking at the timeline, that looks like a 2-month delay.
Well, I don't know that
Right.
I'd characterize it as a delay. This is the circumstance of, vacations and where we are with, scheduling. So we are still focused on getting this to the city council in 2018, which was the objective.
Is there anything that we can do on our end in prepping for pieces of the ordinance? Because I know there's a lot of moving pieces, like we're talking about parking just now. Are there any big discussion items that we could pull out of it and have independent of getting the entire framework all at once?
Planning staff isn't prepared to have a continued housing discussion until August 29th. So if the commission wants to agendize something and have a conversation, you could do that. But
Well, yeah, I mean, I've heard concerns about parking, and I think that is a big concern. So I would advocate for if there's a way to pull out that aspect and have that discussion over the summer, that might be useful. Because we're looking at changing ordinances in regards to the parking requirements.
Right. And
Just think about it.
okay.
We're all eager to deal with parking up here, right?
Yeah. Okay. All right, so then, that's a good segue into the next few meetings. So this at-place memo charted possibility based on the pre-meeting that we had yesterday. So next month is the 27th. That stays the same as what was in the main packet that we received. PTC bylaws and procedures and the Alma training space gym. You want to comment on what that is?
Our code requires a conditional use permit for gyms. One was granted by the director. Area residents were concerned about that decision and have requested a hearing before the Planning Commission.
Okay.
And the commission will have that public hearing and make a recommendation to City Council.
Okay. And then the next sort of segment of this is that you'll notice July 7th is canceled. That's because we're squishing some items into July 25th. And August 8th, we're suggesting to be canceled to sort of get a bit of a break in the summer as a commission for the first time. Next year, if we plan that in advance, we could have these meetings, consecutive meetings, if we wanted to, if we chose to have 2 meetings off, then we would have a month off in the summer in parallel with council. So the proposal here is to do what it says on July 7 and 8 and have those be cancellation and compress the 25th into those things. And then Assistant Director Lade has already spoken to August 29th of picking up the housing ordinance. So if that's acceptable, then that's how we'll proceed.
As far as the timing on these items, we just did the tentative map pretty quickly. Does it make sense to have 2 separate meetings based on the content that's listed in June 27th and July 25th? Do those require 2 full meetings?
It's a
I'm
month
not sure what
apart.
you're asking.
It's a month apart.
If any of the content should be combined on another date so that we could not have a meeting if one isn't necessary, to give staff a break this summer as well.
Well, so
They just look like they're light items, but I might not be knowing what's.
Well, one is a text amendment, actually, that would also include a parcel map, and one is a parcel map.
So it's this bigger discussion on July 25th?
Well, this is when they're going to be ready, and we can't be ready on July 11th.
Okay, and you need to get the CUP approved for the other group in June.
I'm sorry, Commissioner, I'm not quite sure
Okay.
which date you're trying to consolidate or move. Oh, I think I would be reticent to move or cancel your June 27th meeting if that's what you're talking about. This is an applicant who is ready to try
They're waiting for, yeah. Okay, sounds
Yeah.
good. I mean, I'm available. I was just,
Were you speaking about June 27th or July 25th?
yeah, but it looks like the applicant wants us to vote on this, on their CUP, which we should do, so that's why that one's staying.
Okay.
It just looked light, and it looked like they could be merged in one meeting, that's all.
Okay. I thought maybe you were referencing the July 25th items.
Yeah, I was referencing July 25th and combining that with,
Just wondering if they could be combined, those 4
But then
things,
it would delay
staff
the-
isn't
Okay.
going to be ready
yeah.
for them all.
Okay, so is there any other comments on that? Commissioner Walfogel?
Is there any chance that we can cancel the Halloween meeting?
Which one?
The October 31st, the Halloween meeting?
Halloween meeting?
Let's make the decision now to do that.
I second that suggested motion. And definitely go to Santa Rita Street.
Yeah, we can't meet on Halloween.
I got to take my costume back now if we're not going to meet. Okay, so we're going to go with no meeting on the 11th, the 8th, and 10/31. I see no objections, so that's what we'll do.
Halloween's my favorite.
Any other comments about future or announcements?
I have a question for staff.
Question for staff.
Back to the parking thing, is there a chance to survey the Lower Mayfield project, which is all affordable housing, and it was parked at either a 20 or 25% reduction with lifts? Because I think it would give us a lot of information.
So if we can, this is not an agendized item, and so I don't want to continue too much of a conversation about parking, but I'd happy to have an offline conversation with you.
Okay.
Okay, great. I think that concludes our agenda tonight, so we will adjourn at 8 o'clock sharp. Thank you.